Hello and welcome to this Guess Who's Back edition. I think we've done that before, but I'm doing it again, of the Purple Journal podcast, presented by Anderson Corporation, Anderson Windows and Doors. I am here with Mr. Joe Oberle.
That was me barking in the background.
Oh, yeah. Hello. This is a classy show. I like to project.
We're off to a phenomenal start.
I like to project my white trashness onto the listener. But yeah, hi Joe, how are you? You write for the Sports Post, or I guess after this, used to write for the Sports Post.
Yes, and Purple PTSD.
Yeah, even though one of your best articles ever got deleted, but that's a story for a different show. Yeah, we're here with Luke too, Luke Braun.
I exist.
Yay!
Arguably.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Existentially exists.
He's a main writer for purplePTSD.com, the host of the Infinite Monkeys podcast, when that gets posted on the site as well.
Which has no schedule and absolutely no plans for its future. But maybe I'll do one sometimes when I have thoughts.
Yeah. Good enough
I thought you'd have infinite shows.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I mean, who says I don't? We just haven't gotten to them yet.
I got you.
Speaking of, I have no segue. I was going to say infinite shows, but that didn't make sense. We have a special guest on the show. He's returning and regretting every second of it so far. Our good friend from Twitter fame, Mr. Well, how do you want me to introduce you, I guess? Or you can just introduce yourself. How about that?
So my actual name I know is like a big mystery for whatever reason. It's Jordan Reed. That's my name, but you can just call me JR as I am on Twitter. So
the mystery has been lifted. You're on Twitter. Your handle is J Reed Draft Scout.
Yes.
Right. So if people want to follow you, you are a draft master and just general NFL mastermind. And so, yeah, man, thanks for coming back on the show. You were on the show about a month ago talking about the draft, and now we're here to kind of analyze.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for having me back.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, JR. It's great to have you.
No problem.
So, yeah, before we get into the draft, I guess the big news of the day, luckily for us, is that the Vikings finally signed Michael Floyd, the wide receiver from the Cardinals, and
after months of foreplay.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was kind of anticlimactic, I guess. I know they were waiting for the
compensatory pick.
There you go. I couldn't pronounce that.
Because if they signed him yesterday, for those who don't understand how this works, if they signed him yesterday, he would count against the compensatory pick formula for next year. So that means we would be eligible for one fewer compensatory pick. But because we signed, that deadline passed, so as soon as the deadline passed, then we signed Michael Floyd. I have no idea why that deadline is randomly in the middle of post-draft world, and seems pretty easy to circumvent, but whatever. We didn't lose compensatory eligibility by signing him.
Yeah, I get really excited as a child of the Randy Moss era, and I know JR, you live in North Carolina, but on the last show you talked about how you kind of became a Vikings fan because of the Moss and Culpepper era too. I get really excited when we get a wide receiver in general, but one of his skill set just makes me kind of freak out a little bit, especially considering the Vikings offense has been kind of lacking a deep threat or the ability to even set up a pass down the field. So yeah, what do you guys think about the pick? If JR, you wanna let us know first?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I like the pick for multiple reasons. I think Adam Thielen is still kind of a one-year wonder at this point.
Really? You think he's gonna regress?
I don't know. And
I think that means you think he's gonna regress.
I don't know. I'm a Thielen believer, but we know how it works in Minnesota sports. When something good happens, something
That's a
bad
very good
happens.
point.
Something good happens, something bad happens. But I don't think he'll regress. But I think Floyd kind of gives you a cushion just in case he does. Another reason I like it is we know Stephon Diggs is going to miss 2 to 3 games a year just because that's who he was. That's who he was pre-draft, and he misses 2 to 3 games a year just because he's going to have an injury at some point. It's just who he is at this point. And it also provides...
He's got such a light frame, too, you know. Like.
Yeah. He had injury problems at Maryland as well. That's why he fell so far in the draft, too. And it also gives you competition for Laquan Treadwell. So those are a couple of reasons why I like the Floyd signing.
Well, do I get to be the warm or the cold water to be thrown on this? Yes, I do.
That's why you're here.
And Mike Floyd?
Yeah, it's for me. It's a lukewarm signing. If they got him good. For everything Jared just said, the depth and behind those guys who are not, they're not blue chippers yet, but they're good ball players at the top. But they're, what's his name? Thielen's going to get more coverage next year, more attention, so he might not have the same kind of season. And what you said about Diggs, but I suffer from having drafted Michael Floyd too many times down in Arizona for my fantasy team, and just saw him drop too many passes. Year after year, I was waiting for him to make that move past Larry Fitzgerald, and in the last 3 or 4 years, Fitzgerald, he switched positions, went inside, and still, was lights out in there. So I guess I'm excited from the standpoint of a deeper threat that the Vikings don't have. But he's going to have to prove it to me. Not to mention a little bit of the baggage he brings. He just got out of jail, I believe, or
he's on house arrest. And he will miss some of minicamp.
Exactly. So I'm okay with it, but I'm not pumped.
I'm with you, Joe. I it's fine. It's a dude. He's kind of just a guy to me. Like he's a deep threat, and people are talking about him like he's got this skill set, and he did produce pretty consistently for his whole career until he fell apart last year. Yeah. I assume because of the alcohol. So that's going to have to be taken care of. He's wildly inconsistent when it comes. I mean, he shows these flashes of like this incredible contested catch ability, and this he's got speed and he can go be a deep threat. And then he just has games where he completely falls apart and he just like cannot function. I heard a really fun conspiracy theory that the Patriots only signed him so that they could have somebody to practice against who is a little bit more like Julio Jones, size-wise, which is hilarious. And I don't know if it's true at all, but I did hear it and wanted to share it.
It's good to be the Patriots, I guess. Oh my goodness.
It never ends.
I was going to say the way I look at it really is it's such a low risk, high reward situation. I mean, it's a 1-year contract. I'm sure there's like a lot of incentives in there. I don't think the Vikings offense needs him to like be a 1,500-yard receiver. I mean, even if he were to kind of have the role of someone who I've defended to the death against basically the entire world, Mike Wallace, and just draw some attention and take away like double coverage from Diggs and kind of open that up a little bit, or just periodically come up with a big play. I mean, the Vikings offense had no big plays last year, so I think
you definitely needed a deep guy. And the deep guy was supposed to be Charles Johnson last year, but he was abysmal.
Yeah.
So he's a Charles Johnson replacement role-wise is likely how he gets used. And I say that also because his role in Arizona was almost identical to Charles Johnson's, where he took a lot more deep shots but fewer targets on the whole.
And that'll be good, too, I think, because he isn't going to come in with these expectations or kind of be the type of diva, deep threat wide receiver that we've kind of become accustomed to. He's always been a number 2 guy, so I don't think he's really going to come in here and get mad about the number of balls thrown his way either. So seems like a good fit. And
he's got something to prove now, too, though.
Yeah. Chris Carter going to bat for him in a big way on Twitter.
It's because it was a similar situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's his.
Speaking of the wide receiver room, there was a fun thing because you were talking about Thielen. There was a fun Pro Football Focus tweet today that the best QB rating from quarterback to wide receiver, like the best pair QB rating, was Bradford to Thielen. And that's not a completion percentage thing like we've talked about Sam Bradford's completion percentage being like inflating his passer rating because passer rating overrates that, because Thielen actually took the most deep targets of the whole team.
Wow.
He does
a fun stat
He
for
has,
whatever it's worth.
He has sneaky speed, Thielen does. I mean, he doesn't look like he's that fast, but he's pretty quick.
Yeah, he's one of the slower guys on the team. But, like, he ran a 4.45. It's like, not bad.
He's one of the slower guys on the team.
We had fast receivers for a while, man. Like, he would be one of the faster receivers on other teams, but because we had, like, Patterson and Charles Johnson for a long time, and now we got Treadwell, but I believe he's slower than Diggs and Wright, and I think Floyd's slower than
Treadwell is slower than Gideon, the linebacker we drafted.
That dude's, you want to talk about sneaky fast. He does not look fast at all on tape, but he tested so well.
Ooh, Gideon?
Yeah.
He's always been really good. I think he's in position a lot because he'd be killed. Harbaugh would eat his brains otherwise, but not to completely obsess over Floyd, but what do you guys think about with Joe talking about, or Luke talking about the connection with Thielen and everything? How do you think this might change the dynamic of the wide receiving core? And more specifically, like, do you think this, and we've had this argument before, so I don't want to ruin friendships again, but what do you think do you think if this means anything about their faith in Treadwell at all, or is it just something that he was available, we needed it, Treadwell's not a deep threat, let's go add one?
I don't think it does, in my personal opinion. I think it's just, yes, it adds competition to him, but I don't think it puts him, like, on watch to be cut or released or from them moving on from him or anything like that. A lot of people don't know, but Laquan was hurt last year. And
people don't talk about that at all.
Some people don't really realize that he battled a lot of injuries last season, and he was, like, begging to go on injured reserve, but the team wouldn't let him for whatever reason. That's just some things. Yeah, that's just some.
I didn't know
things. I can't confirm that, but I've heard that from multiple people.
What was the injury?
The ankle.
Ankle, yeah. He missed the last 2 games officially with an ankle.
That's
right. But after he took one special team snap I don't know.
When his leg broke or whatever, was that?
Yeah, was that the same one as the one he broke in college? I don't know that.
I don't know. I don't know if it was the same one.
That'd be bad if it was, because I know
that would be really bad. Yeah, but he took one special team snap in the Jaguars game last year, and then didn't even touch the field. He didn't suit up again after that.
He probably asked to go on injured reserve, and they said, "Sorry, there's no more room."
Probably. That very well could be a possibility.
I mean, it would be amazing if he could come in and be the type of receiver they expected him to be. I mean, especially in the red zone or the infrared zone where we struggled so mightily last season. To have a guy that a 2-point conversion I think he had with Sean Hill in the preseason, that was sick.
Well, if that's true, that's really good to hear. I mean, that gives me a little more hope in him, because he's a hard worker. I know he had some struggles picking up the new pro offense like all rookies do, but he worked his ass off, and he's got a body. He can it's a physical receiver, and I just would love to have that part of our the game in the Vikings offense. Have a really physical receiver out there. So maybe there's hope.
I just wrote about it.
Yeah, man. Segue.
Plug. Yeah, I wrote about exactly this, and how do you fix Treadwell and what was wrong with him? Because I think a lot of people will look at he didn't play, and then basically equate that to he's bad at everything, which he's not bad at everything. He's very bad at the one thing.
A lot of people
say
the Zimmer doesn't play rookies, and that gets overblown.
Just wrong.
When
also.
He doesn't play rookies when there's depth in front of them. Eric Kendricks played a lot.
Barr played, Kendricks played. Yeah, no, rookies can earn their spot for sure. He doesn't just keep rookies down regardless of if they're good. He doesn't rush rookies. He doesn't play rookies when they aren't ready, which is just
after 5
making good decisions. It's not like a tendency. It's just correct.
Well, what makes me mad about Zimmer is his dealings with injuries. If that's the case, JR, or Luke, whoever said that, about him being injured and nobody knows about it, and it's like, come on, give the guy a break. If he is injured, let it out there. The whole way he dealt with some of that kind of stuff with Anthony Barr and what have you, that's frustrating, for a reporter.
The Sharif Floyd thing, the way that he talked about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, read my Treadwell piece so you can figure out exactly what to look for and to see what he's doing in the preseason to see if he's better.
And absolutely. Something else I want to add to just the whole Treadwell situation. I was a big fan of him coming out pre-draft. I know he wasn't a great athlete, but he's one of those guys that when you turn the film on, he just consistently made plays. And, you know, a lot of things something I always tell a lot of people, his situation was very similar to Cordell Patterson as far as a personality standpoint. And what I mean by that is, you know, Laquan was the number one recruit coming out of high school. And, you know, he's a guy that's always used to being in the limelight or having the limelight on him. And, you know, him starting all the way at the bottom of the totem pole with the Vikings kind of shocked him, I think. He wasn't used to that.
Thank you.
So he wasn't used to that.
That I have a theory that, again, everyone hates. This is a common theme in my writing. I touched on a lot of the SEC receivers that we've drafted since like 2005 or 2006, and essentially how they've mostly been, busts and whatnot. And a lot of that had to do with the Treadwell being the example, and I wrote about this when I said I didn't want us to draft him based on his measurables. It showed to me that he was always that guy that was so naturally talented that he didn't have to try as hard as other people did. Like he was like in the bottom 10% in bench press, but he's supposed to be this super physically strong receiver, and he is a player, so you know he can negate that with his talent. But I do think that happens to a lot of guys who come up that way. There's just a shock in the NFL that I can't overpower these DBs like I was in college because they're grown men and they're as fast and as strong as me. So I don't know. That was a big part of it for me too. I think that people didn't really touch on. So I'm glad you did.
I think I wouldn't question his work ethic at all. Like that, it seems like from what I've been hearing, everybody who's following all the players says that like Treadwell's been working harder than everybody else.
Well, definitely since he's got here, I do think, and I think he knows.
And he wasn't good off the line of scrimmage. That was one of his knocks, largely because of his strengths. And I see that on tape too, where I don't know, JR, maybe you can also speak to this, but I see that like he's usually trying to move laterally to get off the line of scrimmage. He's not using strength to get by press coverage. And then because he doesn't have the best acceleration, like that means he pretty much can't get open like on a 9 route.
Yeah, his biggest weakness is he only has one go-to move when getting off press. And it's kind of like, DB study as you go on and in your career. And it's like, I only have that one move. So now when I'm pressing Laquan, I already know exactly that move he's going to do. And like you said, he doesn't have the acceleration and the speed now to overcome those deficiencies that he has. So it's something he definitely has to get better in against press coverage. So,
and I think even if he does get his like route depth problems under control, which route depth is the thing that kept him off the field, and if he does fix that, like I think because of his measurables, like you were saying, Joe, his measurables, like that limits his production. I mean, I think he really tops out as like a 600, 700 yard guy. I don't think he's ever going to be, the premier dude, which is super disappointing for a first round pick. But hopefully he can at least contribute and like be a weapon that you have to like pay some attention to.
He could snag a lot of touchdowns too. I mean, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Like a tight end, basically.
Run a stick route. Yeah, like, you can do that against press. It's fine. He runs a great slant.
The bottom line with bringing in Floyd, and you got the 2 rookie receivers, plus you got Thielen, who's definitely a hard worker, is gonna not rust on his laurels, I think, just by personality. And you got Diggs, who's probably wants to be that number 1 guy. You're gonna have a great competition in camp and mini camps and what have you this year. That receiver, it's gonna be fun to watch to see who breaks away from this pack. So it'll be fun.
And I read that I know we brought in 3 guys, 3 receivers that were undrafted free agents, and they were looking at Thielen as like this example of what they can become. So I think they'll be really motivated too. Some of those.
We have 12 receivers on the roster right now.
Right.
That's a crowded room. So that'll be a real fun time in the preseason. Something to watch in the fourth quarter of preseason games.
Absolutely.
And I do feel, not to stay on this point, but when you spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver and the next season you add this many receivers, I mean, granted we lost Patterson and Johnson, It just speaks to me that obviously he's not developing the way that I think they want him to.
I think he came out only plus one guy because you had added Coley, Adams, and Floyd, and then like a bunch of random like Mitch Matthews if you want to count. But I don't really count that. So you only come out plus one dude, and a fifth and a seventh and a $1.5 million dude that's like got a DUI random flyer. I don't think that's really much of an investment.
Yeah. Well.
Fun. Lacking a segue here. That's our segue.
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of thinking about my life in general. I think we can. It just hit me.
Crowded wide receiver room. Is that what it is, Joe?
Yep. It's just story of my life.
Hey,
Speaking of,
no one mentioned Mobo.
Oh no!
And that's like.
what have I done?
I
feel
mentioned.
horrible.
I think I've mentioned Mobo on every show that we've done. JR, I don't know if you know the story that I like to tell just to ruin my credibility even further, but when me and Joe were on a different podcast that we used to record at this bar out in, I don't know, Mounds View or something, and we had an argument. Thank God it wasn't on the air, but now I'm bringing it on the air that I thought Mobo was going to take Thielen's spot on the roster last season.
I begged you to back away from that. I begged you.
I was so high on Mobo, and he let me. For some reason, I can direct message him on Twitter, which makes me happy. And so he's given me a couple fluffy interviews. But
so JR brings up Mobo, and Joe didn't. How about that? Wow.
You know, I love Mobo, man, and I think I posted a video of his. He was at the rookie minicamp too, and I don't know if he's developing or, you know, with this many guys on the roster, if he's even going to make the practice squad this year. But God, that dude is so talented. It just makes me like so.
He should go to tight end. They should start working him as a tight end.
I wrote an article about that. He would have to gain 25 pounds to be like in the realm of what tight ends usually weigh. Like he's 225, and Rudolph is like 255 maybe.
Real fast before we move to the draft, I got a question for the room. So if you've got Diggs and Thielen and Treadwell and Mike Floyd, and say they all make the roster, and just like so you've got room for like one or two more guys between Mobo, the two rookies, Jarius Wright, and you can only pick one or two. Who do you pick?
Rodney Adams, because he can return kicks.
Yep, and Mobo, man, you gotta go with Mobo.
No, Nobo on Mobo.
What about you, JR?
I go with Rodney Adams and Jarius Wright, just because you need that slot receiver with Diggs as well.
Are they going to use him?
You need a Diggs backup. You need a Diggs backup. And Rodney Adams can get a spot as a kick returner and basically take that Cordero Patterson slot.
And he's a veteran voice in that room too. You need that.
Yeah, they'd use Wright on third down because that's all he is at this point. I think he's a game mover. That's what I call him.
Why didn't they use him last year?
I have no idea, honestly.
They used him in game plans when they needed an extra slot receiver. So he was the slot guy number 2 and Diggs was slot guy number 1. Even though they moved Diggs around a lot, like when they needed somebody to do routes out of the slot, they used. And they also used like Charles Johnson a lot out of the slot for some goddamn reason.
Yeah, I don't know. He was like a healthy scratch for multiple games, so it just seemed like he wasn't part of the game plan anymore. I mean, he's a talented guy, man. I mean, he's done some amazing things. In limited
He's the saltiest
production.
Viking on Twitter, is Jarius, right?
Why does he get all disappointed?
He just tweeted something real good. Hold on.
I don't know, man.
I love Vikings fans, even if you don't love me. #Skull.
Yes.
That happened about an hour and a half ago. I love it.
He's got
subtweet all of us.
He should write for Purple PTSD. I don't know. I'm with Joe, man. Move Mobo to tight end. We need more pass catching tight ends. You know, I know we drafted one, but
I don't think he'd beat out Truesdell at tight end.
Wow.
I don't know. I've seen him.
He can't block. He cannot do the block thing. That's the whole point of having a tight end.
I've seen.
Yeah.
Well, Rudolph doesn't block that often either. I mean, they can just put him out there for specific
then he'd be a
plays.
move tight end and not as good at it as Bucky Hodges.
You know,
Let's talk about the draft.
Yeah, I don't know. I think seeing him in person, he's like basically the size of Kyle Rudolph, but he ran like Cordero Patterson. So it's just I mean, if you watch his highlights, he houses bubble screens like crazy. Just throw him a couple of those in the preseason and see what happens.
Who's he playing against, Joe?
Yeah, he's playing against middle school talent.
Yeah, but I mean,
I don't really care if you beat Trey Roberson.
still, but you got to try. I mean, that's why you drafted him.
No, they didn't. They didn't have anybody else they wanted. I don't know.
I don't care who you throw a 6th-round pick at either.
Right.
Well, speaking of 6th-round picks, let's talk about the draft since we had about 100 7th-round picks.
That's so weird.
It was a super interesting draft, man. It was crazy. We kept trading down, and it was just, Slick Rick slicking it up.
I believe of the picks we had, we went into that draft with, 8 picks, and I think we actually selected at the spot we started with 1 time.
Yeah.
We moved every other pick.
Oh, no, I agree with that. We got the 2nd round.
You know what? I guess to start this off, I want to know what your guys' thoughts are on the school of thought that the Vikings could have stayed at 48, gotten Mixon, and kept that, was it 3rd-round pick or 4th-round pick they traded?
4th-round pick.
Granted, I think they got it. They ended up getting it back value-wise, or by those numbers. The points that each pick is worth, or whatever.
I got numbers.
What do you say, Jay?
What do you think about the Cook versus Mixon, or just Cook in general?
I love the Cook pick. Me personally, I'm actually satisfied that they moved up. I'm not a big fan of drafting running backs before the 3rd round, but you have a guy like Dalvin Cook who is a clear 1st-round talent slipping to you, and
Shermer's jaw dropped.
Yeah, I like what he did because we knew everybody.
I love that narrative. That's going to be hilarious in 3 years.
It is. Everybody knew the Eagles were going to select Cook at 43. I mean, it was widely known that they needed a running back, which they do.
The crowd was pissed too.
God, it was so beautiful.
Yeah. But the thing I love about the Cook pick is that everybody brings up his off the field issues and the shoulder questions, but the good thing about Cook in Minnesota is that he gets away from the state of Florida.
Yeah.
A long way away from the state of Florida. So you won't have to worry about his entourage coming.
In so many ways, it's a long ways away from Florida.
Yeah. So you won't have to worry about that entourage or, the crowd that he hangs with, so to speak, coming all the way up to Minnesota. The shoulder issues aren't really a big deal for me just because he only missed 1 game in his entire career at Florida State, and it wasn't because of his shoulders. So,
what do you think about the fumbling and the pass protection stuff? I know that was something that he said he was going to work on at the mini camp, like that was his goal or whatever, like addressing it head on, which was pretty cool. But it seemed like they were essentially replacing Adrian Peterson with Adrian Peterson in that regard. But is that something?
No way. That's not a good comp.
It actually is.
Why?
They're somewhat very similar.
Adrian Peterson?
Because
in fumbles
he's got
and
physicality.
I meant in fumbles.
He
and
doesn't
pass
lower his
protection.
shoulder into contact at all.
I meant fumbles and pass protection, like being able to use them on 3rd down and stuff.
Right. The thing about that is that they're coachable. You can improve ball security and technique and pass protection. But I think him and Adrian Peterson are very similar in ways. He's not as physical as Adrian was as far as finishing runs and things of that sort. But as far as running strictly off instincts, they're very similar. And that's a big reason why Dalvin didn't impress at the combine, because he's more of a player, when you turn the lights on, he's going to come to play. He's not a guy that's going to look great as, cutting around cones and running straight line in a 40-yard dash. But he's a guy, when you go out there and watch him on Saturdays, you're like, man, this dude can play, just because he runs off natural instincts. And that's just the type of player he is. And I really don't. It's kind of was confusing why he tested so bad at the combine, but once you go back and watch his film, it makes a lot more sense, just because he's such an instinctful runner.
Yeah, his combine doesn't bother me even a little bit. Neither do his off-field issues. I wrote another piece. Plug.
Go ahead.
So you're a fan?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my actual initial reaction wasn't very happy, but it was because I didn't know a lot. And then all of Vikings Twitter was freaking out and was like, oh my God, we got Dalvin Cook. Holy crap. How did we get him? Blah, 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 blah. And I was immediately realizing that okay, I'm wrong. I should be excited about this. And then as I did more research onto him and looked into him, I think an underrated thing that we didn't really talk about going into the draft, and you and I, Joe, we talked a little bit about Curtis Samuel for this, but we kind of were missing like weapon. We were missing like guy you're afraid of. And that's an important role on like every offense, be it AJ Green on the Bengals or, Zeke Elliott, or sometimes it is the quarterback, but it doesn't always have to be the quarterback. And that's why we kind of wanted Curtis Samuel. I think Dalvin Cook does that. The way that he weaves through traffic and the way that he's just like deadly in open space and, the versatility and the ways you can get him the ball. Like, sure, his pass protection needs work, and sure, he doesn't lower his shoulder into contact the way you'd like him to. But, like, just the way that he kind of dictates, like, no, you have to pay attention to this guy. That's something we were missing sorely last year, and that's going to make a big.
Well, the last show we all did our predictions at the end, and I think me and Joe both were leaning towards Mixon, and I was stuck between Mixon and Samuel, but I said the reason that I thought it would be one of those two is because we didn't have a playmaker on offense. So I agree with you on that. I've written an article, too, a couple weeks ago that basically talks about the need to add weapons. I think Floyd helps there, too. But do you think, is he the type of guy, I think Vikings fans have been spoiled by AP for so long, that can, house the ball on every play? I mean, is he that type of talent, do you guys think?
Yeah.
I don't think he's an Adrian Peterson level talent for the entirety of his career. Like, he's not going to do 2K yards, but sure he can house the ball.
Yeah, he's definitely a home run threat. His acceleration is outstanding, and he's a guy that takes advantage of or works best in a zone system, which is exactly what Pat Shermer runs. So
yeah,
you see him on his tape a lot. He does really well with perimeter runs, so those outside zones that Shermer loves to run, that we're seeing a lot with McKinnon last year, will now be Dalvin Cook, and his acceleration will now make them have a lot more explosive plays, I think, from him, because the acceleration and straight line speed is really good.
And Joe, you were on his conference call the night of the draft, I think. Or was it the next day? I can't remember.
I know, that was that night, yeah. I can't speak to what y'all were just talking about, but what I liked about the pick was they went up and got him. They saw that this guy was there. They knew his first-round talent, and they traded and went up and grabbed him. That's going to give the kid quite a boost, who dropped from the first round, so he's not going to be sulking about that. You got somebody team that wants him. And, I really like what they did with their second pick, with getting the lineman, and when we move on and talk to him. But I'm excited about Cook. I think with Latavius Murray and him, there's going to be, when one guy comes out of the game, the other guy goes in, it's not as much a drop-off as you might have maybe thought there was in years past when Asiata comes in. So I think it's all of a sudden exciting as having a couple playmakers back there, and it's really helped the offense. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and speaking of the second pick, I obviously loved it because I'm a Big Ten nerd. I'm interested in what you guys think about that pick and what he said at the rookie minicamp, essentially, that he wanted to show the team that he could play center or guard. I know a lot of people are talking about maybe him playing at right guard as opposed to center, and he was a center for his last season at Ohio State, but he played guard before that, I believe. So, JR, do you think they're going to keep him at center, or just?
I think they should keep him at center, just because, he's not an overly great athlete, and at center you don't have to be. That's a position where, you've seen players not be overly great athletes and still be all pro or Pro Bowl caliber players, just because it's a position that doesn't really ask you to move a lot in space, as opposed to like a guard where you're pulling and trying to get to the second level and things of that sort. So I think they're doing the right thing, leaving him at center. And his first year at center at Ohio State, he won the Remington Award, which awards the nation's top center. So the potential and the upside is definitely there for him. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, I love the move of leaving him at center, and I think they got it exactly right.
God, Sperano must be just super excited.
That's so, I feel like people don't really, understand how crazy it is that he, in his first year at the position, he won that Remington Award. Like, we just witnessed Brandon Fusco's career die because of position switching. Same thing with TJ Clemmings. Position switching had a huge amount to do with, how bad he turned out. Like, we've seen players completely fall apart due to position switching, and not only did that not happen to Elflein, he won the best one in the league award. Like, that's insane.
And that means he's probably still learning, which is scary and good.
Like, he could get better. You got a day one starter, likely a day one starter, unless Nick Easton for somehow beats him out or something, or he, gets hurt or whatever, in the third round. And I think because we didn't have a first round pick, we kind of wanted that. Like, we needed, okay, you need to get a day one starter out of your draft, blah. But because we didn't have a first round pick and we still got a day one starter, in spite of that, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I love that they moved up for him, too, because I kind of got nervous. Because you seen Taylor Moton fly off the board. You seen Deion Dawkins fly off the board. And we're just sitting there at 79. And it's like, oh, man, here we go. We're going to miss out on our guy. Rick is going to wait to the late rounds to pick Lyman again. But I love that they traded up to get him.
Yeah, Spielman really had a great plan. He knew what he wanted, and it seemed like he really went after it. I mean, he wanted to address a couple positions, and then he wanted to add depth and as many players as he could later in the draft, considering we didn't have a first-round pick. But, I can't be mad at that pick. I have seen people, we did a live chat on Purple PTSD, and a lot of people were like, why are we drafting a center in the third round?
What?
Even though he wasn't the first center taken, and it was just like, all right, I'm questioning these live chats.
What? Yeah, Posick went above him. That's a big surprise.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's not I could see how people. It's not an exciting pick, I guess, but we just took a first-round talent running back before him, and we need someone to block for him. So I don't know.
So for how many years have we sat by and complained about the offensive line on this team, and we've been asking for them to draft and improve at the offensive line. I have for years. I've been writing it, and I like what they did with the tackles in free agency. And I'm glad they went out. There wasn't many linemen in the draft, but they went high and got this guy. He comes in with a nasty attitude, which is what Zimmer wants. You had
Mahler. Sperano wants it too.
Yeah, Fusco was one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to talk to. I mean, he didn't have that streak to him. Now you got Alex Boone, who's kind of gnarly, and
two Ohio State guys playing next to each other.
And they trained together in the over the spring.
Yeah, man.
I was really excited about it. I think he could start right away. I mean, and they have options now. They can put the best guy in the best position, whether Berger at guard or center, and it's pretty exciting for that offensive line. And the quarterback standing behind him.
Totally. And we also where is my? Well, but before we talk about the next pick, I guess I should highlight our sponsor real quick. It's pretty simple. Essentially, everyone's heard of Anderson Windows and Doors, or Renewal by Anderson. They have their main plant is in Bayport, Minnesota, which is right next to Stillwater. It's 20 miles east of St. Paul. It's on St. Croix River. They are hiring a lot of manufacturing associates for the summer, seasonal and full-time work. They're paying a decent amount of money. There's great benefits, and if you want to apply to any of those positions or shifts, just go to our site. You'll see it. It's everywhere. It's almost obnoxious at this point, but wanted to thank Anderson for their support of our show and for working with us. So, I wanted to touch on, since we're talking about offensive line, the guard that we picked up. Kind of skip over a couple people real quick, and then we'll get back. Jared, what do you think about Isadora and his 26 bench press reps? He's a strong guy.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved the pick. He was a guy that I was high on entering the draft process. I thought he was sort of a hidden gem. Just because, he isn't the most versatile like Mike Zimmer and Spielman have used all offseason, but, he's a guy that was a constant team leader at Miami, started 39 straight games, all at right guard. So
wow.
He strictly played that in his time in college, and I think that's huge, especially for a team that has a huge hole at right guard right now. We don't know if Joe Berger is going to play that full time right now. And we also don't know his mindset right now. I mean, the guy contemplated retirement this offseason, so
he old.
We don't really know what his mindset will be going into the year. And who knows, he might retire mid-season. Not saying he's going to do that, but you never know. Especially with the whole Phil Loho situation happening. That kind of surprised a lot of people. But anyway, I think Isadora is a great pick. He's really good in the running game, and that was their big emphasis, when evaluating offensive linemen this offseason. He has some work to do as a pass protector, kind of struggles versus bull rushes or defensive linemen that get into his chest a lot. But, that's something you can improve on. But overall, I like the pick, and I think it was a steal in the 5th round, and it's going to be a good battle between Isadora, Berger, and Sherrills for, that right guard spot.
Do you think he could end up starting then at some point?
I think he can during the latter half of the year.
Because to me, I'm just thinking we basically would have 4 of our 5 offensive linemen be completely changed from last season, which is...
You could almost count it like that already because you have Berger switching positions.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing, man. I mean...
It's an overhaul. Total offensive overhaul, like entirely.
I posted an article today. ESPN released the odds, the spread for each NFL game, and they had the Vikings going 8-8, and a lot of the people responding to it were saying, that's too much, we're going to be terrible. And I don't understand. Last season, and Joe touched on this earlier, we were begging for even a semi-bad offensive line. I mean, if we had a mediocre offensive line, the thought, in a running game, the team wouldn't have fallen apart. It seems like Spielman's put that in place pretty impressively with these picks and with free agency moves without, blowing up the team in the salaries. So I'm cautiously optimistic. On paper, they're great.
One thing we haven't talked about much is the, like, we've talked a lot about the pass game. Vikings Twitter is in a constant and unending war over, like, Sam Bradford and the passing game and the protection and all that. But we kind of just accepted that, like, yeah, the run game was bad. And, like, don't really talk about, like, how much of an impact that had. Mm-hmm. Like, the run game had way more of an impact than the pass game did on the failure of the Vikings season.
Worse than the NFL. Fact that
Spielman, Giants maybe.
I read today that we were,
but like it's
by
arguable.
Some metric. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, it's like you're arguing. Well, maybe we were second worst. Like it was so bad. So if you spend your first, the first 2 picks and trade up, so like you're spending a large chunk of your draft capital immediately on 2 guys between Cook and Elflein who are supposed to like immediately affect the run game, and with Isadora too, who has like an outside chance to maybe contribute to that as well. Like that's spending a lot of your resources to immediately upgrade the run game, and I think that's a really, really proper use of them.
Yeah. Can't argue with that. What do you think, Joe?
I'm excited about the offensive line. I'm glad that they overhauled it. I mean, it needed an overhaul. There's no 2 ways about it. And they've made a lot of good moves in that regard. There's going to be some competition there, and we'll see how it shakes out. But I'm thinking we're not going to be as injury prone as they were last year. And full steam ahead. You got to figure Sam Bradford's smiling, right?
There's youth on the line now as opposed to 32-year-old injury prone players. It's kind of amazing. I know me and Luke talked about this on a show a while ago, that I think it was Luke's idea, that this offseason is going to dictate, like, if the window for the Vikings stays open, and we'll look back at this offseason in like 2 or 3 years. Of course, but it's impressive that he's been able to, in one offseason, after neglecting the position for so long, in my opinion, really bring in this much talent and competition and depth and youth, and that's what the Cowboys did, and it worked out for them, so who knows. But another big draft talker narrative going into it that was kind of like why Vikings, like why does God hate the Vikings so much, was the Sharif Floyd injury and how that was going to impact their draft strategy, and they drafted Jaleel Johnson from Iowa, I guess as a contingency plan. I know that they got what's-his-face from Green Bay in free agency, but
Dayton Jones, that's a competition.
There you go. What are your thoughts on JJ, my initial buddy, JR?
I love the pick. Once again, I thought it was a steal in the 4th round. You know, we all talked about how we all thought defensive tackle was a huge need of ours. Everybody knows. Yeah, it was a huge need. I thought it was the biggest need outside of offensive line, in my opinion. Just because, you know, you have Sharif Floyd's injury questions. We talk about Tom Johnson turning 33 years old and entering a contract year and coming off surgery.
Yeah.
And we talk about a guy like Shamar Stephen, who's not a defensive tackle, but he's best suited as a nose tackle, being Linval Joseph's backup. So all those questions entering the defensive tackle position. But you sign a guy like Dayton Jones, but he lost a lot of weight last year, guys, trying to play stand-up outside linebacker. And we're not sure if he's gained that weight back yet.
And most of it was fat, by the way.
Yeah.
So he has to get back in muscle, which he's never had.
Absolutely. And in my opinion, I think he's going to be more of a rotational guy at 3 spots, at both defensive end spots and at defensive tackle. I don't think he's big enough strictly to be a 3-down defensive tackle. He's going to be more of that pass rush 3rd down guy like a Tom Johnson, but he's going to be a good asset. But as far as Jaleel Johnson, what you're getting with him is, he's a fantastic run defender, and that's something we've really struggled against, especially last year. We needed to improve our run defense tremendously. And, he struggles a little bit as a pass rusher. He shows glimpses from time to time, but what better situation for him to walk into than working with a guy every day in Andre Patterson, who's one of the best defensive line coaches in the business. So he can help him develop those pass rush moves and, give him some more tools to work with in his tool shed that he's shown, but he just doesn't properly use them from game to game.
There's a couple bodies ahead of him that, in Dayton Jones and Tom Johnson, that have given some time to develop, like you're talking. And I thought it was a great pick too. I was right with you, JR. I thought they might even go at this pick in the 2nd round, before everything shook out. But so I was pleased for them to get somebody decent.
Do you
like
mean
this.
at the position, or do you mean the player, or both?
The position. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not enough of a draft Nick to say who they were to pick there, but I wanted him to get somebody. I was hoping somebody might either drop him in that position or they could get somebody good. And this seems like a great pickup.
This is a guy who we probably would have been okay drafting at 86, where we originally were with that pick, and then we traded down like 3 times and accumulated a lot of the late round value we accumulated was with that particular pick, and all those trades and then still getting Jaleel Johnson is pretty slick, if I do say so myself.
Slick Rick.
Trader Rick.
God, that is so bad. Trader Rick? That has like no ring to it. What was wrong with Slick Rick?
You've never heard of Trader Vic's?
Oh, I was thinking
was
of Trader
that what it
Joe's.
is?
Okay.
Trader Vic's, isn't that a cheap rum? I got a nosebleed from that in college.
It's mentioned in the Warren Zevon song. So Werewolves of London. So I'm drinking pina coladas at Trader Vic's. Come on.
Slick Rick is an infinitely better nickname.
Yeah.
Well, I've used both, but I after this weekend or after the draft, you have to re-establish him as Trader Rick because that's exactly what he did.
The
I
Vault.
refuse it.
Purple Palace.
Word.
Speaking of the Purple Palace, Rodney Adams is going to be playing in it too because we drafted him.
I don't know much about this guy, but I'd love to hear about him.
I mean, yeah, man, I've watched a lot of highlights, and obviously I'm going to defer to JR on this, but I guess my first question for JR then would be, is he solely going to be a special teams kick return guy, or do you think that he's got the ability to come in and steal some snaps on offense?
I think, what he's shown at South Florida is that he's strictly a gadget guy. As a receiver, he's strictly a gadget guy. He's a guy that runs those tunnel screens, those bubble screens, and those jet sweeps like we saw with Cordell Patterson. That's what I call Rodney Adams, Cordell Patterson light, so to speak. Physically.
I heard a fun comp, and I think it was on another podcast you were on, JR. I want to say it was with Andy Carlson, that he was a properly valued Troy Williamson.
Yeah, I think Andy said that.
Like Troy Williamson, but you drafted him in the right spot?
Yeah, it's actually a good comparison.
Does he drop the ball all the time?
He does. He's a fumbler also, which scares me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a huge fumbler, but, I don't think he'll be more than that number 5 or number 6 receiver ever on your depth chart, but where he does provide, instant impact is as a kick returner.
Yeah.
He's a very good kick returner.
Yeah, we're gonna miss Patterson, I think, a lot. It's a big part of our game, so.
Yeah, I don't think you can just replace Patterson like that, but that does, having another gadget guy, like he can perform that function, I guess.
He's like a Randall Cobb then, kind of, but not as good. His highlights are amazing, but those are highlights.
Ran a couple good double moves in rookie minicamp highlight videos, which, that matters however much it matters.
He's not as polished. He's not as polished as a route runner as Randall Cobb was. Okay. He's not as thick as Cobb was either. Cobb's a stout guy. It's kind of thick.
How big is Adams?
I believe he's about 6'1", maybe 190 pounds.
He looks skinny.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing. 6'1", 189. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You're amazing, dude.
Yeah. So now it's just
ran a 4.44.
Yeah. He's very electric. Very electric, very explosive.
We had some fast dudes, man.
Floyd ran a 4.47. Cook ran a 4.5. Thielen runs a 4.4, but is the slowest guy on the team.
No, he doesn't run a 4.4. I think he runs a 4.49.
Okay. Well, speaking of, did you guys want to comment on Adams at all?
Since 4.49.
He seems to be blown up minicamp. Everyone says
he was the single lowest player for the draft on Arif Hassan's consensus big board, which is pretty much a conglomerate of like all the draft community big boards. If you took like 50 of them and combined them all together, and Rodney Adams was like in the 300s. Although a lot of people I don't think scouted him at all, which means and I think of people who did scout him, he was like in the top 250 or something. But like based on that, a lot of people will call this a reach, and it seems like the reachiest one. Like when you do all the value math, like he's the one that hurts you the most. And I also don't really love the fact like how far we traded down with this one. I don't think we got very good value, and we missed out on guys like Desmond King and Isaac Asiata and a lot of guys that like we really could have targeted at. I think it was 132 is where we were sitting at. And then we traded down for the picks that turned into Adams and Isadora. And those guys could turn out to be, better. The sum of those guys could be better than like what we would have got at 132. But it'll be interesting to watch, these Desmond Kings and these and Isaac Asiatas. And I think Nico Siragusa went. And all those guys are kind of guys we all wanted and missed out on because of the trade down to end up getting Rodney Adams out of some small school.
What do you think about the idea that it shows how much the Vikings did value what Patterson did in the kick return game, and while this guy was rated low as a receiver, they really just want him to return kicks because that's a big part of.
Well, they used half a 4th round pick on it, so it's not like they're spending, it's not like they're opening up too much of their pocketbook.
But if they reached like from 300 to the 100s, maybe that just means that they really value the field position.
Or they're just higher on him than everybody else is, which is inherently wrong. It just is, a hot take, I guess, that the Vikings have.
You skipped over Ben, how do you say, Gideon?
Gideon.
Yeah. He was
hilarious on Twitter.
I had a segue because we were doing the 40 times, and everyone talks about how slow this guy is. But you ruined it.
Sorry, man. I was just too quick.
Gideon, man, Michigan, You can't complain getting players from Michigan, at least in my house.
Joe, sitting on Purple PTSD's chat going on for the draft.
Yeah.
Working up their way up to this pick beforehand, I couldn't believe how many times maybe it was just one guy that kept repeating it. Don't pick Gideon. Don't pick Gideon. And then when they picked him, everybody oh, no!
Yeah, it was like me and Treadwell last year for the live chat. The first thing I said was, don't take anyone but Treadwell, I think was what I said. #. And it was like a slow-motion car crash. I don't know why we got
I think I said
hated
anyone
so
but
much.
Kamara, and the Saints got him, and now he's competing with Adrian Peterson, which is hilarious in my head canon.
There was a guy in the chat, too, that his username was Bucky Hodges, right?
Hey!
He said, please draft Bucky Hodges. He was there for 2 days, and he finally got his guy. I got teary-eyed, but...
Anyway, Jars, is the rapid, is this guy just his speed that he's so slow? Is that the deal, or what? I mean, coverage, he's not. He's a good run stop. He's just not good in coverage.
Well, I've heard when it comes to pass coverage that it's like a chore for him. Like he doesn't want to do it as much. Like that's not his game.
It's a lateral agility thing. I don't know, JR. What is the deal with this dude? Because his measurables are fantastic, but like it doesn't show up on tape.
Yeah, well, I mean, combine he moves really well, but in games he's just not an overly great athlete. He's one of those old school 2-down thumper linebackers. If the draft was like 15 years ago, if he'd have been in the draft 15 years ago, he would have been like a first or second round pick. Just because of how good he is versus the run. He's a guy that plays off pure instincts, and once he sees something, he goes and gets it as far as in the run game. But if you're asking him to, cover running backs out of the backfield and slot receivers or things of that nature, that's not really his calling card, so to speak. But if he's a guy you can stick at Mike linebacker or a guy on special teams, I think would be just fine. He's a guy I call a rah-rah guy, an energy guy. And, every team needs that type of guy. And he's a guy that's going to be an instant impact guy on special teams. And I don't think he's going to be more than a high-end backup.
Doesn't that give the Vikings another guy who's who could be a good Mike linebacker and is good on first down, but you got to pull him off the field because of coverage? What's Kentrell Brothers? Isn't that what they?
Yeah, he's like a Kentrell Brothers. Another competition for him. Yeah, that's a fine value, but I don't love it in the fourth. Like it seems like a reach, right? Everybody's calling it a reach.
Yeah, he's gonna fill the Audi Cole role, basically.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, a bit of a reach there, but like not. I mean, it's no Willie Beavers. Some people on Twitter were saying that, like, oh, this is our Willie Beavers this time. It's like, well, he's gonna make the team.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, do you think some of those things are coachable for him too, or is it just that's his?
I don't know how coachable lateral agility is.
Yeah, I don't think it's coachable. I mean, it's just who he is as an athlete.
Well, since I talked about Bucky Hodges, I think we should touch on him because there was, like I said, some excitement surrounding his pick, and the Vikings obviously needed to add a pass-catching tight end. I guess some of the stuff I've read that is he's kind of got inconsistent hands and has some drop problems, which seems to be the common theme with all the guys offensive players we picked. But is he the type of guy where at some point we could have a 2 tight end set that isn't out there to block, or is he gonna just be the backup? JR.
I think he's going to be your tight end too, so to speak. He's never going to be an inline blocker. That's just not his calling card right now. He's a guy that you can flex out wide, flex in the slot, and take advantage of those mismatches with him against those slot receivers or those outside linebackers. But he's not a tight end. I call him a move, a wide receiver, so to speak, just because he's not going to give you anything in the running game. He's not a blocker at all. But he's a guy that you can really create mismatches in the red zone for. And that's where he caught a lot of his touchdowns at Virginia Tech, is in the red zone. So he gives those guys another red zone threat.
He's
overall,
lean,
it
too.
was a great value pick. Yeah.
And he ran a 4.57.
Oh, man.
And he had an 11-plus foot broad jump and a 39-inch vert. Like, this dude's a freak.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Hey, JR, I got to ask you a question. Now that the draft's over, what do you do now? I mean, are you already on to the next year, checking out, trying to get tape on players that are going to be coming up for the next year? I mean, is this just a year-round?
Lots of drinking.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll go by position, depending on 2 to 3 days. I'll just go by position just to get a quick glimpse on guys. So I watch 2 to 3 games of 2018 guys. Like last week I did offensive tackles, and this week I'm on the receivers. So just taking quick glimpses at those guys, and I'll do a write up the 5 top guys that I like heading into the season at each position.
Man, that's amazing.
So if you had to grade our draft, since we have about 10 minutes left here, I guess let's go around and assign a letter grade to it, since that seems to be the common nomenclature, if that's the right word. JR, if you want to go first. I don't know if you wrote anything about that or posted it on Twitter, but you seem pretty happy with the picks.
Yeah, I gave it a B+ overall. The only pick I really disagree with, so to speak, was the Ben Gideon pick. I thought it was a reach at the time, and I thought they got a better linebacker that they waited for in the 7th round, and Elijah Lee, who was a player that I really like, and I think he'll be more of a instant impact guy opposed to Gideon. I don't think either will play a lot in year 1, but I think Elijah Lee has a better chance of stepping onto the field earlier than Ben Gideon, just because of how thin the Vikings are at that will linebacker spot. But overall, I love the draft from start to finish outside of the Gideon pick. And, I love Spielman accumulating picks at the end and getting a jump start, so to speak, on some guys that he thought that could have ended up as undrafted free agents, but instead he went ahead and guaranteed and getting their rights and trading back and getting them in the 7th round. So I gave it a B+ overall.
Did you like any of the undrafted free agents Vikings picked up?
I like Tayshaun Bauer, the defensive end from LSU.
Daniel Hunter Light, right?
Yeah. I think he has a chance. And another guy I liked was Eric Wilson, the outside linebacker from Cincinnati. His measurables were off the charts. I think he ran 4.48 and he jumped the 39.5 in the vert. So his measurables were off the charts for a linebacker.
Yikes.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I guess I would give it a B myself. I really liked how aggressive. I had trouble at first with trading and back and forth. And in fact, on the last day, I said, okay, this isn't happening for a while, so I took a break. I had to go away and said, I don't think they're ever going to pick, but. I remember Luke saying, more bites at the apple, more bullets in the gun. So it's like, it's a crapshoot. Go after, get numbers, and bring them in, and have them start working and see who's the best players and go from there. So I was really excited. I liked the first 2 picks very much, and and pretty much after that, I didn't know. I was surprised at all the animus against Gideon, but we'll see what he can do. B for me.
I'm with G. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Well, real quick, I've heard or I've read some of the people that have graded the draft and said it's impossible to really give them like an A or an A- because they didn't have a first round pick, so they were just hamstrung. But I think that looking at it from the other side of it and saying the value that they did accrue considering they didn't have a first round pick and Dalvin Cook and then picking up Elflin, I have to give them I don't know, A-, I guess. If Cook, like Luke talked about and forgot that I used as my main point for the crux of most of my articles, can be the type of weapon that we think he is. It's hard to grade drafts right away, but that would change the offense in so many ways, and I think that really can't be overstated. And then the Elflin pick and the other guy we talked about, Isadora. Again, being able to completely rebuild the line in one offseason is amazing. So I'm pretty high on it. I think
You're a homer.
Joe said it's a crapshoot. We're gonna miss on guys like Gideon, but I'm looking at the the positives, and I can't help but get excited about it.
I'm going to be a homer with you, Joe. I'm going to go with an A- too, but it's like a close one. Because I'm torn between A- and B+, but it's somewhere in there where it's like, it's a very good draft, but imperfect. I think, Dalvin Cook, unbelievable value at 41. A lot of people had him as top 20, top 15 guy. That's unbelievable. Pat Elflein, best center in the draft, and you got him at number 70. That's amazing. Jaleel Johnson is another steal. Isadora, if he's a steal, and if you get even some contribution from any of the other 7 guys, which you have to, right? There's 7 of them. That's a phenomenal draft class. I do think that everybody's talking about this you got a head start on undrafted free agents thing, which I guess is fine, but what did you give up to get there? If you gave up on that 4th round pick, that 3rd, 4th rounder, that 132 pick, and you gave up on Desmond King or Nico Siragusa, I guess the way I'd pose the question is is the difference between Nico Siragusa and Danny Isadora, is that difference less than whatever you're going to get out of another 7th round pick or whatever that kind of thing? So, or trading down a little more in the other rounds. So if you gave up that kind of equity to get more undrafted free agents, I don't know if that's worth it. But that said, we're talking about day 3 value here, and all the shifts are very small in consequence. So even if it is a really bad move, it's a small impact bad move. So overall, you got to still give it an A- because you got yourself an offensive weapon. You did a whole bunch of things to fix the offensive line, and add that to what we did in free agency, and it's a total overhaul. Without a 1st round pick, and it's a 1st round pick you kind of didn't really have a chance to enter the draft with unless you just wanted to throw the year. It's hard to ask him to do much more.
It's you got to factor in too that I agree with the point you're making. You're giving away this to get that, and is that worth it? But the other thing we tend to forget is that these guys have talked to these players, and that's a big part of it too. They're sitting down, they're talking to them, they're asking a lot of questions, they're doing all this behind the scenes work, and there's so much different. At some point in the draft, the difference between someone who goes 10 picks earlier, it's not that much. And
I agree with that a lot.
If they go find someone they really like because of he fits their kind of system, their kind of guy, as Zimmer likes to say, they're going to go after him. And I guess we will not know if it pans out for years. So,
and I think going back to Cook and his off the field issues in that vein too, I think I put a lot of faith in Zimmer's ability to assess character, and I think he has a good track record of working with players with baggage, at least in Cincinnati. So when we bring in a Floyd or a Cook, I really believe that while they are coached, and I did get a lot of that from your conference call, Joe, that obviously Cook was coached on what to say because he was saying all the right things about God and making the team better. His answers were really stock answers to me. But I think Zimmer and Spielman obviously, like you said, sit down with guys like that and assess whether or not they think that they can manage that character, and I think that's a big part. And I think that was a quote from what's wrong with me? The Vikings coach, the old guy that walked out with his T-shirt on last season.
Bud Grant, Joe.
Bud Grant, I know, dude. I'm past 24 hours up at this point. He talked about being a coach in the NFL and the main job being managing personalities because these are grown men with a lot of money. And I think Zimmer while he struggled with that and that came out in the media a little bit, I think he's really genuinely trying to fix that aspect of what he does because the NFL in 2017 isn't the NFL in the 70s. But I do take, I guess, a lot of faith in his ability to look at a guy and say, is he going to screw up again, or can we work with him? And so, like you said, I think a lot of these guys are fits for what they're trying to do.
The other thing about you making the point where people were saying the Vikings, they couldn't give them an A- because they didn't have a first-round pick. Everybody was going on gaga over the Patriots. And when did they make their first pick?
And you got a first-round guy without a first-round pick.
That's exactly it. I mean, I don't know how
That's silly. That doesn't make sense to me.
They're taking an actual positive and turning it into a negative, which is the hallmark of what Vikings fans do. And the national media, I saw like a lot of C's, and I don't think they have any idea what the Vikings plan is, or even what.
Some B pluses. I saw a lot of those. So
I did a round.
Most of the national media is pretty high on the Vikings draft.
Oh well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I saw a couple C's, and I was like, all right.
JR, how did you do with the? I'm sure you mocked, and did you keep track of how your picks went at all?
I actually got 2 picks right, but the draft slots were wrong. So I had F-line at 48, and I had Jaleel Johnson with the second, third round pick.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very nice.
Couple of steals.
Luke, did you win?
No, I did not have Dalvin Cook in my. I didn't think that was remotely possible. I mean, he fell way further than he was supposed to. And I also was kind of betting against a trade, which I would do again. I thought it was unlikely that they traded, and then they did.
We had a contest to give away a gnome for any of our readers that could pick who we were going to pick at 48. And granted, we didn't end up even picking at 48, but nobody, of like the 30 people, nobody picked Cook. So
nobody had this. Maybe there was like a FanSpeak mock draft that somebody posted on Twitter that like had Dalvin Cook falling for some reason, but it was a pretty low probability event, which we should count our lucky stars for.
Yeah. So with that, I think we are pushing this to the limit time-wise. So I wanted to thank JR for coming on the show again. You are an amazing guest, and we really appreciate you coming on. Did you want to plug your Twitter feed and then your podcast too, so people can listen to you more?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you guys for having me on. I know I have
anytime, man.
A lot of fun when I come on here. You guys are awesome on Twitter as well. But
yay, Luke.
Just to plug my podcast, along with my friends Jason Brown, Miles Gorham, and Yinka Allende, the Climb in the Pocket podcast. Sort of a new podcast we got that just came out about a month ago. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. We got a new one coming out next week, next Monday. Sorry, we'll be discussing a lot of things. Also, be on the lookout on the Vikings Age for some 2018 draft content.
Awesome.
Can you drop a 2018 take for me? Just one, just a fast one.
And then we'll hold you to it for a year.
Yeah. This is a commitment.
I don't think he's going to give me anything. Got to go to the podcast to get that.
Yeah, and I'll post a link to your show on our site too, so people can find it easier. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on the show, and I want to remind everyone that our sponsor is Anderson Corporation. If you're looking for a job in manufacturing, check out the site. There's links to it everywhere. You won't regret it. And the way things are going with my hosting of the show, I'm actually probably going to apply in about 20 minutes. So check that out. And thanks for listening. Check us out on Facebook at purplePTSD and on Twitter at purplePTSD, obviously.